Welcome. Welcome to this month's Global Unity Festival. Welcome to all those tuning in across the American continents and beyond. This time allows European countries also to tune in. So welcome if you're tuning in from Europe. And please let us know in the comments where you're dialing in from. We're live streaming today on multiple channels, on our YouTube channel and our sister Facebook group, Earth Elders. And so today we're joining together to experience different forms of coming into balance and alignment. Into balance with ourselves and each other and the world. I'm sure the news about the situation happening in Europe, in Ukraine right now has reached you, and it's very prevalent right now on the media. And there's some incredible support, incredible well-being that's being offered, and that support is unprecedented. And it has only been possible because of our deep, deep interconnectedness that we have right now in our world. And yet, if we look a little bit deeper, actually, and explore what else, if there's any other challenging circumstances, political circumstances around the world, then we find that there are over 50 countries right now in armed conflicts. And so Ukraine is, whilst perhaps the most vivid and the loudest experience right now, by far not the only one. And of course, there are natural challenges as well. There are floods in Australia, and I'm sure so many other things. And so, with all of that happening, how do we cope with all of that? How do we find balance in the midst of all that? And so, in a few moments, you will have an opportunity to discover deep wisdom of our today's guest speaker, James Kawanui, an Hawaiian healer in a lineage of over 20 generations of healers. We will be exploring how we can come into balance in the face of all these challenges in the world around us through a blend of modern and traditional Hawaiian wisdom. And after that, there will be an opportunity to join in a collective, synchronized experience, which is really at the heart of the Global Unity Festival. It's an opportunity for us to create waves of well-being through the collective field, circling the world. We now know that our thoughts, intentions, and emotional states can affect the world around us, so the actions matter, of course, and our voices need to be heard. But we're now discovering that there's something deeper than that. And even on a very pragmatic level, everything starts with our internal experience, with our thoughts, with our feelings. And if we are personally in a balanced state, we can be of so much more service externally. But there are even deeper effects that happen, beyond the pragmatic, practical, observable, everyday actions. And I will speak to that a little bit more slightly later. And now, so what's unique about the Global Unity Festival is that there will be several events you can participate in. And you'll be able to choose which experiences you join from a range of different events. Some will be inspired by meditation, some enjoy prayer, and so many more different ways for us to uplift ourselves. And slightly later, I will share how you can find and join all those different events and who's going to be sharing their offerings at today's festival. And so at the Global Unity Festival, we want to acknowledge the true diversity of human experience, through all of these different traditions and cultures and practices that are available for us to raise our well-being and make the world a better place. So I would like to acknowledge deeply those who have come before us and paved the way for us to be where we are. And all the keepers of wisdom from all paths, native peoples all over the planet, all the diverse cultures and traditions that give so much richness to our human experience. I acknowledge the peacekeepers, the change makers, the pioneers, and the visionaries that have shown us the way. And yes, there are so much more to improve and to create and to increase our well-being. But in a way, well, that's the beauty and that challenge for us to continue exploring and evolving. And I invite you to acknowledge your people, your ancestors whose legacy you carry, and acknowledge yourself and each other for coming together here today or joining in later in the replay. And I invite you to tune in deeply into yourself and into all those who are joining this space, who are joining the Global Unity Festival with the intention for our collective well-being. Acknowledge that there are many across different time zones and countries who have a commitment for something greater than themselves. So let's connect to all those all over the globe and thank each other. Thank yourself for your commitment to something greater, for our collective well-being. And let us know in the comments what brought you here. Most likely you saw the poster or event announcement about the Global Unity Festival. What did that mean to you? What spoke to you about that? And chances are that there's something that calls you to come together with others, with other like-minded beings. And so if you see someone in the comments, or if you discover new wisdom keepers who will be hosting their offerings today, reach out and connect, because this space is not our event, right? Like, it's not that we are organizing this. We're giving the space for all of us to co-create, to come together and to interact. So it's very much our collective creation. Whatever emerges in the Global Unity Festival is what we can create together. And this is where our platform comes in. Later on, I will share how that works and how anyone can add their offering. Anyone can host an event. So if you know some artists, some conscious leaders, invite them, let them know about the festival, and invite them to contact us and to reach out and to host their events together. So, and also, what do you think? Do you believe that our thoughts, intentions, and emotional states can affect the reality around us? Some intuitively believe in that, but some want more proof and more evidence. And perhaps you have friends who are somewhat more skeptical about that than yourself. So we have some wonderful scientific projects really exploring this question deeply. Is that real? Is that possible, that our thoughts, intentions, and emotional states can affect something beyond the immediate experience, within our within our skin? So I would love to share very briefly about some of these key projects that have been going on in the world over the past quite some time now, actually. Some of them have been going for over a decade or so. And this is all under the umbrella of the science of interconnectivity, which is really about the interplay between human consciousness, living beings, and the Earth's subtle fields. And there are several organizations who are exploring this. There are several independent researchers. And these are some of the biggest ones that have produced the most knowledge and the most evidence. So there's so much more about each of these on our website as well. So you can see the link at the bottom of the slide. So feel free to go and explore in more detail. You know, there are links to all of them, to all the different research that they've done. And I would like to say in a few more words about the Global Consciousness Project. So the idea there is that they have this network of instruments that measure these effects, and those instruments are random number generators. And what they're observing is that big global events actually have an impact on these measurements, which shouldn't be happening. And let me share a brief video about some of the key premises of this research.
The Global Consciousness Project started in 1998. The idea was that if really large numbers of people feel the same emotion and think the same thoughts, they create a real consciousness that makes the world different from what it would have been. The implication is to find out whether consciousness and intention and emotions and so forth are stuck inside your head, or if they extend outward as a kind of mind-matter connection.
How does that work?
This is one of two kinds of random number generators. You get ones and zeros at a really high rate of speed. Mathematically, we expect the average to be right in the middle. 50 will be ones, 50 will be zeros. And it really is like an electronic coin flipper.
You flip a coin 100 times and it would be 50-50?
That's right. We do that in 65 locations around the world, continuously, day after day, 24/7 for years.
Counting ones and zeros.
Counting ones and zeros during the great outpourings of emotion in the world. These devices stop producing random data.
Give me one, for instance. What's the event you measured?
Events like Princess Diana's funeral, bombings of the embassies in Africa, the tsunami that killed 250,000 people, terrorist attacks of various kinds. We look also at pleasant events like New Year's or religious celebrations. We'll look at the data, and what we find is a change from 50-50 odds to something different from that.
Right. So, and this is some recent data, literally from a few days ago, of the random number generators following what's happening now in Ukraine. And what you see here is that whilst those numbers, as you heard in the video, should be random, so they should be going around the zero more or less in a random pattern, they start to deviate. And the more of these instances are measured, the more deviation is actually observed. And I'm not going to go into the deep science and the statistics behind that, but the conclusion is that it cannot be a mere chance. So there's something like 1 in a trillion odds that this is just due to mere chance. And what's interesting is that actually compassion and cooperation has often stronger effects than these negative events. So it is possible, because of all of the support, because of all of the collaboration that has been going on, actually these are positive effects that we're observing. And we're just seeing that it's impacting the physical reality. And another very popular research project is by Maharishi International University, who've been doing research for decades and publishing so many different articles. And the premise that they're exploring is that when people come together meditating, it has measurable effects in the decrease of violence and crime rates in the local communities. And the idea there is, like in science, we have the conductor and superconductor, which is more coherent and doesn't let the external field to penetrate it. We can, in a similar way, create a coherent society, and with that prevent external effects from affecting that society. So some pretty exciting idea. And so we have the conclusion that those effects are measurable, and we also have some guesses. How many, or not even guesses, some of them have been actually evidenced, right? What would be the proportion of us coming together that's required to actually have these effects happen in our societies, in our communities? And you can see the numbers there. It's not a big number. Now, this data is based on, specific practices. So having different practices than the research was based on might have different effects, and that is for us to explore. And really, that is what the Global Unity Festival is all about. Can we come together in these numbers and beyond and start seeing effects? And so I would like to say in a few words, well, how do we organize all of this? How can we generate this community space? And how can we do that with all the different practices happening at the same time? And this is where we have created a custom-built platform. And I'll briefly going to go through some of the key functions, and then we will move to our program today and have a conversation with our guest. And so briefly, if you go to globalunityfestival.org, and you can either scroll down here and click on all events for today, or just click on the festival later on. And you will see the 3 waves. So we're now in wave 3 in the American region. And you can see all of the events happening in this wave. And our central stage is here, and you have some live events that will be hosted by our festival hosts and some pre-recorded. So we're still in early stages, and what really matters is that you create an uplifting experience for yourself, that you create that coherence. And it doesn't matter how you do that. And that's why we're offering that diversity. So you can see that Will here will be hosting his event, Exploring Balance and Truth. He'll be sharing from the Gene Keys wisdom, and you can simply join when the event starts. You can see the countdown timer indicating the start of his specific event, and take part. And all of that is going to be around a single moment, so that all of us can come together at the same time and create these ripples and experience that collective power of our consciousness. So this is really the essence, the very simple space that we have designed for us to connect. And there's more elements here, and you can click around and explore who's doing Facebook only events, who's doing live stream events, pre-recorded events, and see the programs and see which ones you would like to join. And all of that is in the overarching intention to uplift the world. And that single common intention is what unites us all, and that is what really serves as that unifying element. So feel free to explore and see the individual events. And and choose which ones you would like to join later on. So the peak will be in about 50 minutes. And so I will now welcome our today's guest to the stage. Welcome, James.
Aloha, Alex. How are you?
Aloha. Very well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And James is a Hawaiian. My pleasure as well. James Kawainui is a native Hawaiian healer, spiritual guide and mentor. He's an expert in clearing blockages from trauma, injury, and illness. And James empowers people to experience freedom, hope, and serenity in life. And his passion is helping people live positive, productive, and pain-free lives. Thank you so much, James, for joining us today.
That sounds like a lot.
Well, I mean, having said that, that's one of the things I wanted to explore with you, because I understand that you're in the lineage of 20 generations of healers, right? Like, what was that like for you? Because in a way, it's quite a responsibility, and how was that a natural thing for you to follow, or how did that evolve?
No, I can tell you that it wasn't a natural thing, and it took me a while to step into it. And I will say that for most of my life, I did my very best to run away from it. And I had something that happened to me over 20 years ago that literally forced me into the track that I'm on now. And we can talk about that or not talk about that today. I don't know if it's important in relationship to what we're doing, but and through that exploration over the last 20 something years is come to understand the lineage that I carried. Because when I was growing up, I didn't have any connection to it at all. But the more I learned in this last 20 years, this next stage of my life, the more I realized the connection that I had. And it was through the research that a cousin of mine did that really landed me inside of all of that. And she went back and did the genealogical research, and it took her years to find it. And one day she knocked on my mom's door. My mom used to live in Honolulu. She knocked on my mom's door and she said, "I think we're related." And so she said, "I've been doing this work." And so she sat down with my mom over the next few months, and she kind of showed her where we had come in. And it was an interesting thing because my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, had been adopted at birth. And so she lost literally her family lineage through that adoption. And what happened was, in this exploration there was a point in 2009 where I went home for a family reunion. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and I went home and I was handed this book, literally a spiral bound book, and it had 16 generations of my lineage that she had researched inside of it. And then there was a book that I had read by a historian in the mid-19th century. His name was Samuel Kamakawa, and he wrote a book that was called Ruling Chiefs of Hawaii. And I recognized the last name that was inside of the book, and I went back into his book, and I went 4 more generations back. And at that point, I heard very clearly, I had a clear audience experience of a voice that says, "How much more do we need to prove to you that this is who you are?" And I closed the book and I walked away, and I never came back again. It was a very powerful experience for me, because then it was, and my lineage they were part inside of the royal family, but what I have come to the work is that we were the healers and the mystics and the masters inside of understanding energy. So there's a word that goes for that. I'm not even going to say the word today, but the relationship to that maybe everybody would understand is that my lineage were the shaman, the medicine men of my culture. And so be able to embrace that, because as this journey was happening, there were things that were happening to me, this understanding and this idea of inherently or unconsciously or maybe consciously knowing what other people were going through, and having that experience of being able to feel what's happening in them, in me, and being able to look in front, to sit in front of somebody and say, you know, when you were 6, you were wearing this pink dress and it was your favorite pink dress. Let me talk to me about that point in your life. So James, the man, has absolutely no clue what that is. But inside of that connection that I had, the Hawaiians call it your kupuna, my ancestors, that information comes through me. And so that's a kind of responsibility that takes a long time to embrace, because the way that I look at it and the way that I was taught is when people come to you, they are literally putting their life in your hands, and they're saying, here I am, help me make sense of this trauma, help me make sense of this disease or this illness, help me make sense of why I do these things that I do in my life. So, and we can talk about lots of different layers inside of that today, but that's not why we're here. So I'm going to stop there because even though people may want to understand where I am or how I've got to where I am, they've come today because of in some ways of the focus for the festival for the month, right? Which is about balance. Is, if I'm not mistaken, that's what we talked about. It was about balance and harmony, right? So.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to speak to that and what you just shared, that it sounds like very much it found you, right?
Even if I might not have been ready in that moment.
Right. Wow. And actually, this is an interesting point, right, about readiness, because I think we can weave that in the conversation of balance as well, because we often are pushed or pulled, depending on where it comes from, called upon, right, to situations that we're not ready for. And how do we then kind of cope with that and still find the balance? So perhaps we can come back to that angle later on as well.
The question is, how do I take my fear and I put my fear to the side, because this is something that is showing up in my world. And you can be like me and you can deny it for years and years and years, but it's going to come crashing down at some point, because if it's a purpose that you have in your life and you're not following it or fulfilling it, I can tell you from personal experience that it makes life really hard, because you're going to be put up against your obstacles. You're going to be put up against all the places that you don't want to look at inside of yourself. And it's going to force you to do that, or in some ways, and I've seen a lot of people do this, is going to break you. And you really don't want to get to the point where you're broken or get broken down in that way, you know. And I was very stubborn, and I had to go all the way to that point. So the reason that I do the work is to prevent people from having to do that, or not having to go down that road.
Very much so. And there's so many things just from what you're saying.
We got to stay on the subject, Alex. We can come back and talk about different things, but I think today this piece is really important, you know.
Absolutely. And what you brought in about the purpose as well, that kind of really is at the core as well of holding that balance, because when we're off purpose, we're off balance, right? So exactly. That's a really important angle to all of that.
The Hawaiians would call that pono, which is part of what we're talking about today. But that idea of pono, which is that idea of balance and harmony, not only in my world, but inside of myself, right?
And so the theme that we have set for today is Ho'oponopono, a model for conflict resolution. And right, so we have obvious situation, you know, happening right now around the world, excuse me. And it kind of is that broader conflict that is somewhere far away there for some of us.
Right.
And for some of us, the conflicts are much closer. So perhaps
most conflicts start inside.
Right. So where do we start, right? You know, where does it all begin?
I think before we talk about Ho'oponopono, we actually should talk about what that actually means, because I think in the modern context, people have gotten a slightly different view. I have my own opinions, but there's a slightly different view about what Ho'oponopono means. So, in its essence, what I'm just gonna, I wanted to break it down, and the Hawaiian language, which I'm not fluent in. I will be very honest, I am not fluent in. But the Hawaiian language is very phonetic, and so if you look at Hawaiian, the language, you can actually pronounce things by just looking at the syllables inside of it, right? So we're talking about ho'oponopono. So we look at that, and all words have separate meanings of the separate words and then put together. So, and I'm going to use my glasses because I want to make sure I get this right. Ho is like a prefix. So like a prefix that adds emphasis or meaning to something else. And the literal translation of it is to correct. So most people go ho'oponopono and then they immediately go to forgiveness. But the reality is that ho'oponopono, the literal immediate translation is to correct or to bring back into harmony. Okay. But it really didn't have anything to do with forgiveness. It does now, but again, I'm talking about the language, right?
So it seems like we've a little bit simplified it, to make it kind of easily digestible, but
Well,
there's so much more to that, right?
there's a whole discussion that we can actually talk about that, because even for me, it's taking that in some ways that ancestral that wisdom that we have that's generational, and bringing that into a modern context, because the way that Ho'oponopono may have been done in old Hawaii may not be in a way that is contextual in modern life, right? So it got adapted. Let's just put it that way. It got adapted, and I'm not saying that it's not a beautiful way that it got adapted, because the steps that obviously everybody understands, that I'm not even going to talk about today, you can have your own experience of that, is powerful in itself. I want to talk about the deeper meaning behind it. Okay, so pono inside of itself, and the cool thing about Hawaiian language is that one word can have 20 different derivatives or definitions of it, right? So, and I listed a few of them because I just wanted people to have an idea. The word pono really means goodness, uprightness, morality, moral qualities, to be correct, to have proper procedure, it's a true condition or nature, righteousness, virtuousness, in perfect order. In other words, to behave correctly. Okay, so we're looking at Ho'oponopono. Is the pono actually means care for or attend to. So you look at the word Ho'oponopono, and that's really the base meaning of it. Let's just put it that way. And then we start to look at that. But inside of that then becomes the idea. And before we even talk about forgiveness, let's just talk about pono. And pono is this place of being in alignment, right? With nature, with people, with things, but mainly pono means being in alignment with self. So before I go out and I look at all the things that are happening in the world, then it would behoove me to start to do and see the inner work of who I am. So as I was putting this together today, there were so many things and how to lay this out. And the one piece that I want to talk about is that Ho'oponopono is a tool for restoring balance. Okay, so we're looking at it as a way of restoring balance. Again, balance in relationship, right? But also balance in self.
And you mentioned that it does start with ourselves, right? So
Everything starts
balance
with
first
us.
within. And we know the four statements of the Ho'oponopono as the way that it's been popularized. Sorry, please forgive me. Thank you, I love you. And in a way, I guess it's also a tool for us to get ourselves in alignment, but in a way it's kind of directed at another, and we can perhaps miss the step before that to get into alignment ourselves in the first place.
So inside of Hawaiian culture and the Hawaiian, in some ways, mindset, right? There is a deep innate understanding of the interrelatedness of everything. In other words, our relationship to self, our relationship to others, our relationship to nature and our world. And so if we look at what we're doing is we're bringing in the principles, right, of harmonious relationship. So looking at the way that we look at the world is, how can I create harmonious relationship, right? And so then it makes sense that Ho'oponopono became, in modern context, about forgiveness, right? In Hawaii, in old Hawaii, Ho'oponopono was more an idea or process of conflict resolution. And it was between individuals, it was between families, it might have been between villages or districts that they would have brought in this idea of reconciliation. And the process of that was very sacred, because before people would say, you know, we want to do this process, there would be a lot of prayer that was involved inside of it. That there would even be, on some levels, there would be cleansing that would happen. So people would go inside and they would do a cleanse, some for days or maybe even a week, where they would talking about a personal cleanse. So the clearing of the inside of who I am, right? So and to get really clear about what that conflict is and how I want to be able to communicate that, right?
So you're
And then go ahead. You
yeah,
want to
so
say?
did I get you right that, you know, that preparation and that clearing and cleaning, does that happen on either sides or on the side of the
On both sides, but before there was ever a meeting, that would happen
right?
inside of that, in that way. And then they would um, they would agree to someone to be a mediator. Hawaiians call it wow, which is a mediator. So somebody would come in and they would be, and they would say, okay, you guys are both agreeing that I am the mediator for this conflict resolution. Everything will go through this process that I am involved in, right? So instead of two people trying to resolve their issues, what would happen is that there would be a mediator, because without that neutral party, without that non-judgmental party, how do we even give ourselves permission to not only to communicate what our feelings and our thoughts are, but be able to consciously listen to the other person? And I think that's where we are inside of our modern society, is that we're so busy and we've so created this place of what my opinion is and you having to agree with me. That divisiveness that we're seeing right now, I think, is a result of that, because there's no space inside of that for common ground anymore. There's not even a place where we're going, wow, let me hear your view and your side so that I can understand you better, so that I can find the relationship or the place that we can meet in between, right? So when we're talking about Ho'oponopono, when we're talking about forgiveness, or we're talking about conflict resolution, all these things have to be part of that. And the process then is of giving everyone the opportunity to acknowledge how they're feeling and what they're thinking, And it's not that you jump in as somebody's talking about it because and contradict or try to talk over where they are. No, that doesn't give people the safety or the ability to do that, to have their feelings and thoughts heard, but it doesn't allow for understanding. So if we're talking about Ho'oponopono, we're talking about forgiveness, there has to be a space inside of here of understanding another person's point of view. Okay. Does that make sense, Alex? What I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there seems to be like what's the right word for that? Like a hygiene for resolving conflict, right? Like you go through these
There's a
certain
protocol. It's a
protocol kind of, right,
right?
right. So I'm quite eager, actually, if you're happy with that, to take it a notch further, I guess, to some extent, and maybe we can then bring some concrete, sort of living, real life example to that to explore. But often we don't have the ability to come together in that conversation because one of the parties doesn't want to. Maybe they're the aggressor, maybe whatever the case, they may just not want to come into that dialogue. What do we do then? How do we deal with that situation? Is there some protocol for that or guidance?
Well, there's a couple of ways that we can go, but if we're talking about the idea of mediation and we're talking really about being able to overcome conflict, then it's picking a neutral party or someone that we agree on that can sit and listen and give space to both sides. That's one way of looking at it, right? And obviously in the idea of the modern context of Ho'oponopono, it was about doing this healing prayer work to that other person to help them to hopefully come into a different place inside of themselves. If you listen to the story of Dr. Lim when he was working in the facility in Oahu, and he never actually talked to a patient, right? What he did was he pulled people's records and he looked at where they were and all the things that were happening inside of their lives, and he prayed to where they were, and he prayed for them to be able to get to a place of overcoming what that was. So there's a power inside of that as well. So one way, if there's a conflict of that is not able to be resolved, you can look at that. I would caution you on that, and I would make another suggestion, because I would say, where's the place inside of you that you're not willing to step into the center? Where's the place inside of you that you're holding on to your feelings, your opinions, and your views in such a powerful way that you're refusing to even step into the center ring to be able to have that conversation? It is way easy to blame the other person. That when I do that, I absolve myself of all responsibility, because it's not my fault, it's yours. And how do we even find anything to come into resolution with when I'm already convinced that it's not my problem, it's your problem? You won't come so we can sit down. So before I even go to that person, I think the work, more than anything else, is to go inside and look and go, wow, where are the places that I'm holding on to? What are the opinions and the thoughts that I have that are keeping me separate from the world?
So in your healing practice and in your experience, what do you find that there are some patterns that are frequent, that are common, that prevent people from achieving resolution, that require them, to have the inner transformation first?
I'm going to say this is a dangerous road to go down, Alex, but these are things that not everybody may be able to or ready to think about. And so I'm going to pretext it this way. As long as I think that the world is, that things are happening to me, and that where we are and where I am inside of my life is a result of the things that have happened to me, then I will continue to be and stay a victim inside of my life, because my where I am is not because of the things that I've done, but because of the things that have happened to me, or the things that have happened externally to me. And one of the biggest pieces that I bring to the table when people come to work with me is, I say, are you ready to take responsibility for everything that's happened in your life?
Well, that's
Because
a pretty
that's a
steep
that,
demand, right?
yeah, and guess what? A lot of people run away when we get to that place,
Hmm.
because they're not ready to. They're not, and the reality is, and I know this is maybe very controversial and hard to grasp for people. But the reality is that you are wherever you are in your life because of the choices that you made. Yes, you may have been put into situations, but in that situation, you had a choice. And then people come back to me and they say, "Yeah, but what about when I was a child and I was a product of abuse and what have you?" Those things may have happened. There was no reason for them to have to have or create a lasting impression, because there, any point inside of that story or that pattern or that behavior running, when I have the awareness that that's happening, and sometimes we need help finding that or getting to that place. When I'm aware that I'm about to run a pattern or replay something again, and there's this awareness inside of me, the next step inside of that is, can be, not should be, can be, if I don't want this to happen to me again, how can I make that different? Now I'm starting to look at my life and say, wow, I have a choice, or I have the opportunity to make different choices.
Hmm. So if it's not always necessarily about us creating the situation that we're in, but it's about us choosing whether we let it
What we
impact us or
what
whether we
what we do inside of the situation in that
right.
moment, right? Because I can get triggered, I can allow that energy in, I can be affected by whatever is happening in that moment. Or I can look at that and go, wait a minute, how can I do this differently? Do I need to react in an angry or a negative way? Can I stand back inside of myself and be able to look at that person and go, wow, I wonder why or how they got to the place where they're feeling, carrying, and holding this energy or this emotion or whatever it is, right?
Hmm. There's two angles to this that are coming up for me now. The first one is, well, if it's about how we respond and react and how we let it impact us, what do you find hooks people in those patterns that are not in balance, that take them out of balance? And why do we even put ourselves and get somehow even, I guess, comfortable in positions seemingly out of balance? Or is that some kind of other way of looking at what balance is?
Oh, we don't even have time to talk about that today, because what we're actually talking about is the way that we um, create memory, and we create habits, and we create patterns, right? And then they become behaviors, right? Because there's a part of our brain that it has the ability to think logically and to create understanding in the world. And then there's a part of our brain that actually works automatically, right? And again, I'm not. We don't need to get into all of that, but there is that part. And so there, when something happens over and over and over. So I'm just going to use myself as an example. I had a pretty abusive relationship growing up with my stepfather, and um, what he did was very methodically, and I don't know if he was doing this consciously or unconsciously, but very methodically broke down my self-confidence and my self-awareness. And by constantly um, telling me things about myself that became my reality. Let's just put it that way. So the piece about not being good enough, the piece about never amounting to anything, right? When we hear those things over and over and over, it becomes a script that we play. And after a while, that script becomes automatic. So whatever situation that we're in immediately trips that script. Okay. And one of the easiest ways for me I use this analogy because of where we are, and in some ways it makes sense, right? Think of yourself, your brain, how you operate in the world as part of the operating system of your amazing supercomputer, because that's who we are. Consciousness and our mind is our supercomputer. Your operating system doesn't think about putting windows up. Your operating system doesn't think about Zoom coming up or Google or whatever it is, or even when you're typing. The computer, when you type X, you get X. When you type Shift X, you get capital X. When you hit Control X, whatever you highlight on the screen disappears. The computer is not thinking about the process. It just reacts. It just does, right? And in some ways, that's how we move through our life, is that automatic reaction to the things that are happening, so that we're not even conscious. Scientists have said that by the time we're in our mid-30s, 95% of what we do on a daily basis is automated responses. So the bigger conversation here is how to become present and mindful inside of everything. But it feels like we're getting off the subject of of forgiveness. But part of that idea of forgiveness, though, is realizing that there are these programs that keep running inside of us, right? The idea that these programs are in the automated responses, right? So you look at the idea of the Hatfields and the McCoys, because that's one of the ones in the United States folklore about two families that were at odds for each other, right? And I can talk about that within nature, nations and cultures as well. But two families that are at feud with each other because of something that happened between two people. Okay. And then the generation goes by, or that generation, and everybody's still angry because this thing happened between these two people. So now we have conflict with all of the people together. And then that literally gets handed over to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. Then we're 3 or 4 generations down the line now. And these two families are still at odds at each other. But the reality is that the people in the present generation, they have no connection to the original conflict. Yet we're still holding on to that. We're still holding on to that energy of being in conflict with each other. And if you look at it just from a rational standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense at all. Right? Yet the pattern is already inside of there. And so when we come together and we're doing Ho'oponopono, or we're wanting to create conflict resolution, we have to give the space for all of those feelings, all of those thoughts to come out, so we can look at them and go, oh my God, no wonder you feel this way, because of how you're thinking, how you're feeling. And if I don't understand that, then how can I come into a place where we can find harmonious balance again, or we can actually talk about it, because it goes, wow, you were thinking this, but I was actually feeling this way. And then they both go, oh, that doesn't make sense. Let's do something about that. And so can you see how the progression could be, right? And part of that is having to admit, or having to acknowledge, and for a lot of people, this can be challenging, that there's been wrongdoing, but I may be the one that was the perpetrator of the wrongdoing, even though that might be wrongdoing on both sides. I still have to take responsibility for my part inside of this.
And it's actually echoing what's happening now in Europe.
In lots of places in the world. That just happens to be the highlight right now. Exactly. But in lots of places in the world.
Exactly. That there is also the pretense for the generational historical developments of that relationship, between the two countries. And that's what you spoke to, right? About these generational patterns that are carried over. So it seems like, in a way, conflict resolution is somewhat conflict prevention through, or better done through conflict prevention with actually addressing these things up front in advance, would you say?
And that's something that you're talking about that very rarely gets done
Hmm.
because we're too caught up inside of our opinion or our view or our feelings. Emotions are powerful things, right? Our emotions are powerful. Our emotions drive literally everything we do. It drives the decisions we make, the friendships we create, the really how we move through the world is driven by our emotions. Yet most people are not really aware of what their true emotions are. So how
Hmm.
can we even find resolution till we find that peace inside of us, right? It
So,
forces a lot of introspection, and introspection for most people um, is not something that they can step into. One, because it's too scary. Two, maybe they're not used to or don't even know what the process is of that. And because it's so scary, I say it this way, they might need to have their hand held. In other words, they may need help. And that's why a practitioner that can hold that kind of space. And again, the practitioner literally is the mediator between the mind and the person. I mean, if you look at it that way, and I never thought about it that way until this moment, right? The mediator between the mind and the person that's wanting to come back into resolution inside itself.
so there's so many elements to keep in balance there that are at the interplay, right? There's the
There is
generational, there's the purpose, there's the responsibility, there's the interrelationship with the other.
communication, the ability to listen very deeply, to be able to hear what the other person is saying, right?
Mm.
And yet, people talk about forgiveness and they say, and everybody just, and I can't believe how many people come to me and they want to do this whole opponent practice and all they want to do is forgive, 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 right? Yet they're reciting that mantra stays conceptual. In other words, it's something that it's rote and they keep saying it over and over and over inside of their head, but it hasn't landed where they feel what they're actually saying. So it never works. And not only that, think about the chasm that's between having my emotion and looking at true forgiveness. And it's way too big. That's too big a step for most people to take. There has to be interim steps in between that I can get to so that I can actually step into true forgiveness, right? And one is I actually have to acknowledge. I have to acknowledge, not only acknowledge where I am and be very truthful, be pono inside yourself, but I have to be able to acknowledge where that other person is as well,
Mm.
right? And as I come into acknowledgement, then can I come into a place of acceptance? Because my job is not to change you or fix you or make you believe me. That's not my job at all. Although most people think that that's what they're doing. And I hold my opinion because my opinion is right. And we create separation as soon as we think that I'm right and you're not. And as long as that mindset is there, there's never going to be a reconciliation.
Mm. So perhaps we can speak to those steps, which are useful, in preliminary steps towards forgiveness, towards getting to forgiveness.
First is acknowledging my feelings and my emotion and my thoughts, being really clear about that, what that is. And then can I look at the other person in a way that I can start to acknowledge where they are? I didn't say that I have to agree. I just have to acknowledge that that's where they are inside of themselves, right? It's a step. It at least gets us moving in the right direction. And then in the next step can be, can I accept? Can I accept where I am? Can I accept where they are without having to change or do anything? You know, that whole idea about walking in somebody else's shoes, right? We only have this concept of where we are and what's going on in our lives, but we really don't have a concept of how they got there. This person that's in front of me may be angry, and they may be projecting this anger at me in this moment. And so all I do is react with anger in return. And as soon as that happens, all communication falls out. It breaks apart, right? But is there a place of being able to have a level of understanding and awareness without reacting, that I can listen to where they are and then have a better understanding? So maybe this person is angry because somebody cut them off in traffic. Maybe this person is angry because they had an argument with somebody else before they came. Maybe this person is has this emotion or is angry because they had a really bad day. I don't see all of that. All I feel and see is the projection that's coming towards me, right? So instead of stopping long enough to go, wait a minute, there's more to this story than I'm looking at, I just jump right back in. And so it's like the you shut up, no, you shut up, or F you and F you, and then it gets lost. We get lost inside of it. When I can come to that place of acceptance, then can I see, wow, they're just a human being, just like I'm just a human being trying to get through this world and trying to do the best that I can do. And there have been obstacles and situations that have been put in front of them as well as me, right? That are keeping us in the places that we are, which is continuing to be separate.
So, yeah, I hear it's really about that, you know, responsibility seems to be at the core of this, right? It's like, but it's also,
I have to take responsibility for my actions as well, right? That's a tough sell for a lot of people.
And so would you say, if it starts with the personal balance, in a summary, right? So we first become aware of our emotions, of our personal space. We then look at the cause and effects in a way where we have taken perhaps some actions or something towards escalating that situation. And then in a way, I guess we find the mediator and have that conversation, if we can find that. Would you say there are some other aspects, other steps to this?
Well, I wrote something down this morning, and I don't know where it fits inside the context of this, but I think it's something that's important to talk about as well. And that is, forgiveness requires attention and intention. There has to be an intention of wanting to forgive, right? If I'm stepping into this place of this trying, and I don't like to use the word trying, this attempt at reconciliation with someone, right? I'm going to have to put my attention into it, and I'm going to have to be really clear about what my intention is inside of that resolution, inside of coming to this place of forgiveness. And without that, the process may be way more challenging.
So it really needs to be, I guess, mutual, right? We both in that interaction need to, or the communities need to have that intention for it to really be productive.
Even though we say, well, they don't want to say and they don't want to do, we don't really know that there might be just a decision or a judgment that I've created. And I haven't talked about that today, but a lot of when we're looking at conflict resolution is how can I look at it in a non-judgmental way? And that's a big sticking piece for most people because we have our judgments. We all do. We all do. And if you say that you don't, I'm going to call you a liar because we all carry judgments. Our judgments is our biases, which is in some ways the racism that we hold. So they're all the same thing. They may be different words, and they may carry the different words may carry different energies. But that piece of that judgmental, right? And there's two pieces to the I mean, there's lots of pieces to the judgmental, but how judgmental am I being towards myself, and how judgmental am I being towards the other person, right?
Mm.
And any kind of sitting together to come to terms, there has to be a place of, can I look at this from a non-judgmental point of view? And that's why sometimes the mediator is really important, because that's who they are. They are the non-judgmental balance, I would say, between conflicting sides or conflicting views or conflicting emotions, right?
So I wonder if there's some perhaps tips and tricks and tools that you can recommend for that first step for us to become aware to our experience, because sometimes it's unpleasant and it's really, we don't want to go there, right? And so what happens if we experience some strong, unpleasant emotion? How do we manage it? How do we cope with that? Is there some perhaps methods that you can recommend?
I'm laughing because the first thing is that I have to be able to acknowledge where I am and how I'm feeling, and take responsibility that that's where I am inside of my life. And then there at some point inside of that process, where do I come to the place of going, I'm ready to resolve this, not so much between people, but inside of myself. And so it requires brutal honesty with myself.
Mm.
And I'm going to preface it this way: brutal honesty with myself without going into judgment and self-criticism, because that's literally what happens when we step into that place. We look at where we are and we start to take responsibility for ourselves, and our ego mind automatically puts us inside of judgment and criticism. And then I don't know for most people, but I watched myself sometimes spiral out of control because I just go right into the not enough. I go right into the place that I criticize myself, and it throws me off. So maybe the other thing that we're talking about as well is, how can I come into balance? I almost guarantee everybody that when they're inside of that emotional reactive place, I will almost guarantee you that you are not in your body in that moment. You're absolutely not in your body. You are so caught up inside of the emotion. You are so caught up inside of the mindset of whatever that is, that the way that I describe it to people is, you could be in a room completely black, not be able to see anything in front of your face, and your mind will be telling you and showing you everything that's happening, because at that point there's not even any kind of a connection to your physical form. So in other words, you're not even present enough in this moment to be able to take the next step. So if there was a tool or anything that to where the starting point is, can I be as present as I'm able to in this moment?
I love that. So you reckon we could do some guided practice to come back to our body, to come back to our presence in a moment? There's a few things I'd like to do before that, but you reckon we could go ahead with something like that?
Most people think it's really, really challenging. I will tell you that is so easy. That is crazy. Right? It is.
Yeah.
But they discount it. because we've already, the human beings that we have this in some ways innate thing that everything that we do has to be hard. And if it's this easy, then there's part of my mind that goes, well, then excuse my language, well then shit, why wasn't I doing this before? Right? Again, so you see how fast the judgment and the self-criticism comes in. Right? This is what I tell people now, right? And I started talking about this recently. When you get into that place where you really feel like that your mind and your life is really out of control, can you actually have the awareness in that moment that what you're actually doing is watching a movie? It's like you're on Netflix, or you're on Amazon, or you're watching something streaming on YouTube, and you're realizing that you're watching a movie. I'm watching the movie, which is my life happening in front of me. And I tell everybody, pick up the remote and just hit pause. In other words, I'm going to stop wherever I am, whatever I'm feeling, whatever's happening right now. I'm going to do my best to just stop. Hit the pause button, right? And when I take and hit the pause button, somebody's talking to us. I'm going to come back to that. When I hit the pause button, right? Then the next thing, then the only thing, or the first thing that I do is I just take a breath. I take that breath and I just breathe, and we can all do this in this moment, right? So wherever you are, even just listening to what I was talking about, hit the pause button. Just hit the pause and just stop for a second. Open eyes, close eyes, your eyes, doesn't matter. And just take a breath. But what I mean by taking a breath is really take a breath. Feel your breath as it moves through you. Feel the air as it moves through your nostrils. Feel the air as it moves down the back of your throat. Feel yourself inhaling and exhaling, where you actually feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. Feel your lungs expanding and contracting. Your complete focus in this moment is to give yourself permission to let go of everything else and just. And you're making your breath a physical act. You're bringing your breath back into consciousness. You're bringing your breath into being aware of how and what it's doing as it moves in and out of you. And even though we've only been doing this for about 20 or 30 seconds, now, as you're breathing in and out, become aware of what, if anything, has changed inside your physical form. It might be that it's easier to breathe. It might be that you recognize how tight your chest is, or how much your solar plexus is being affected or is reacting, right? In this moment, there's nothing to do about that, or may not be anything to do, except just acknowledge that that's what's happening. As you continue to focus on the movement of your breath as you inhale and exhale. You're giving everything else outside of you permission to just drop. What you're doing is coming back into relationship with you and your physical form and your energetic body. Oh, yeah, here I am. I'm sitting in this room. I can feel myself sitting on this chair. I can see myself, or realize that I'm looking at a screen in front of me. I become aware in a way that I realize where I am in relationship to everything around me. And that experience that I'm having in this moment is not mind related. It's actually feeling and energy related. Now give yourself permission to let your breath drop deeper and deeper into your body. Can you give yourself permission to breathe down to a space that's behind your navel? So you're opening up the energetic field inside of your body by allowing this energy that you're breathing, which is not just air, but Hawaiians call it mana, life force energy, that's moving into your body. And you're giving your body permission to relax. I'm coming back into relationship with my physical form, and I'm giving myself permission to relax. Now, can I look at my world and realize that I am here and the world is here? And for if you have your eyes closed, what I'm saying is the world is around me. So there's a space that I've created between me and my energy and the world as it exists outside of me. And just notice what that feels like. And then my question to you is, how often during the course of your day do you give yourself permission to do this for yourself? Because every time you stop, and every time you interrupt your mind, and every time you come back into your breath, it's literally an act of self-love. I am saying that I am so important in this moment that I'm going to take care of me. And me means just taking a breath and acknowledging myself without having to do anything else. So my suggestion to you is to give yourself this way more than you have been. And when you start to use this and start to create this for yourself on a more consistent basis, all you need to do is to do this for 20 or 30 seconds. I'm stopping in this moment. I'm letting go of everything that's outside of me, and I'm bringing myself back into my present state. From this place, everything can change. That's my gift and my offering to all of you today.
Simple and effective. And I would imagine that, the more we practice that on a daily basis, before even the conflict comes up, it makes us more masterful and allows us to, of course, deal with any impeding conflict much easier, right?
It'll help us be more aware of what's happening around us so that I can, instead of react, start to respond in a different way. And respond is a place of strength. Reacting is literally giving my energy away to whatever is there.
Reacting is giving an energy to what's there, to the kind of
whatever is outside of me. Every time I react, what I'm doing is I'm giving my energy away to whatever's in front of me in that moment.
Right, and that's the kind of hook that we were talking about earlier, right? That holds people in that gridlock sometimes that they can't get off.
And then we get lost inside of ourselves. So Alex, I actually want to do something today, and just for people that joined in and listened, that I created a meditation for a book collaboration that I was in last year called Sacred Death. But I created a meditation. It's called the Self-Love Meditation, and I'm going to drop the link in here right now. And if you can share that with people, that would be great. And if you go to this link, you can sign up, and I will send you the meditation that I created for it. And maybe you can actually start using this as a landing place for yourself, and be one of the tools that you have in your toolbox, you know. And if anybody wants to have a conversation, you know, they can just reach out to me at www.jameskowainui. So Kowainui is KAWAINUI. So I put a couple links in there, and there's a link as well for a free 30-minute consultation. People are, if you're in a really tough place and you're wanting help and guidance, then the first step is to realize that there might be a need for that help and guidance. But the second step is to reach out and ask for help.
That's the mediation, right, between the mind and the human
and the self. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. So I want to just in the completion acknowledge some of our participants here who've been commenting.
Yeah, if you want to, and somebody said something that is.
Yes. So Denise is saying, love this conversation. Did a massive piece on true forgiveness around my mother recently, and it's taken me 27 years to take the blinkers off. Right. So it's like it can take time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yay, Denise. I celebrate you for doing that. I celebrate you for being able to step into that space and to allow you to have allowed yourself to look at the bigger picture. Right. Because again, that place of stepping into somebody else's shoes and realizing that, oh, wow, they're here because of these things that have happened. And in my acknowledgement of those things happening or having happened, how can we come into a different relationship? How can I come into a different mindset inside of the relationships that I have? That's where forgiveness starts.
Very much so. And just a few things. So this is a long comment, but really the core of this one is that actually doing the work ourselves can be an encouragement for the other to do the same, right? So really by leading by example in a way, we encourage others to follow.
We always lead by example. We always lead by example because I become the model for the people around me. When people around me see that I'm changing and that I'm taking positive steps to change, it creates, if we're talking about energy, and you were talking about it before, we're creating this field of energy that we're sending out to people. And inside of creating and sending out that field of energy, we start to create change around us. You know, I see it all the time in the work that I do, where I'm working with one person in a family, and inevitably I get a conversation, or she you know, or that person sends me a text or a message that says, wow, guess who just reached out to me? My brother or my sister or somebody that I haven't talked to a really long time, and they just said that they wanted to have a conversation. How amazing is that, right? So I've created the intention of that shift for myself. I like what she said, the radical honesty about where I am. And I start to take the steps inside of myself. And as I do, one, as I send this energy out to everyone, but the other part of that as well is that as that happens, I become the model for what that could look like and feel like. And that's powerful, right? So I had a teacher that said that we're all pillars of light. So in that moment, you become a pillar of light for the people around you.
Wow, on that powerful note, thank you, James. James Kowainui was with us here today.
My pleasure, my honor. Yeah, and to everybody that was here today, thanks for letting me rattle on there for a while.
Well, it was as someone is saying right here, this is life-changing. So one of our listeners is posting that. So thank you so much, James, for the guided practice, for your wisdom, for the wealth and breadth of the different angles to it, and the practical tips. I think we covered quite a lot today. So thank you for sharing your gifts in this space.
Everybody, give yourself permission to take that step. You know, it feels like it's hard, but it's not really. And once you make the choice, I swear to you, the universe will conspire to help you stand inside of that space. So be brave and take that step. And again, I'm going to say, reach out if you need help, because I'm here and there's lots of people that are there for you. So
yeah, and
okay.
that's the beauty as well, that it dawned on me at one point, there's so much help out there, there's so much support, and you know, with all of that there, like, we cannot not make it, you know. It's like we haven't got a choice but to really break through whatever we're dealing
We have
with.
to stop thinking that we're alone and separate.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, James, and everyone listening in. There's the contact details of the website as well on the screen. So please reach out to James to tap more to the deeper layers of that wisdom and to the personal experience and the personal touch. And I can highly recommend. So once again, thank you, and many blessings to you, James.
Aloha nui loa kako. That means love to all of you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are moving through our peak into the completion, and once again, a reminder that there are other synchronized events happening right now. There are some that have recently started and will reach the practical, the collective element very soon. And just to remind you how to find them, depending on where you're listening to us from, the best way to do that is to go to our Global Unity Festival website, click on the festival section, and we are now in wave 3. So right now you can check who's live streaming and select those hosts, and you can actually also preview that and take a little peek into what they're up to right now, and then join them and read more about what their offerings are. And we also have this wonderful offering here that's actually a continuous live stream happening 24/7 by the Global Prayer Room, that I found and really wanted to add here. So there's, you know, so many opportunities for you to experience that inner balance through so many different traditions and practices. And even if they are not live, it doesn't matter, because what matters is that kind of energy, I guess, that you're feeding into the collective field, so to speak. And you can do that in so many different ways. So if you can also shortlist here pre-recorded, you'll see some events that range from sound healing to Ho'oponopono prayer as well, that we just talked about, and a more classic guided daily mindfulness meditation, and a universal prayer, where you'll actually see a list of different prayers from different cultures and traditions of the world, which really focus on our collective peace. There's a Christian prayer, there's a Baha'i prayer, a Buddhist prayer, and so on. And you can put the background music here and simply read through those prayers and contemplate, and really focus also on that potentially even global, right? Start, of course, with your immediate environment, your surroundings, and expand to your local community and beyond to really share that well-being. So right now, regardless of which events you're joining, I will give you the opportunity to do so, and we'll complete here on the central stage. And I would like to complete with one of our hosts' beautiful musical offerings, a beautiful song, Rise in Love, that really feels like almost an anthem for the Global Unity Festival. And it has lyrics there as well, and I invite you to sing along. And this is yet another practice, right? We can sing our way into a higher well-being around the world. So enjoy that, and that will be the completion for our today's Wave 3 for the Global Unity Festival on the 6th of March. Thank you. And of course, this is a regular event. This is a monthly event. So join us on the first Sunday of every month, and the next one being on the 3rd of April. I welcome you all and look forward to connecting with you once again.
We are one big family. We are here to forgive and set us free. Hear the calling, it's for you and me. Open up your hearts, receive the gift. Live as one, live as one, give as one, give as one. Shine your light like the sun. Rise in love. We are born to be surrounded by the love from up above. Rise in love. We are meant to live together and to reunite as one in love. We are one in the greatest love. It's a time that we've all been dreaming of. Hear the calling, it will change your life. Everyone around the world, wake up and thrive. Live as one, live as one, give as one, give as one. Shine your light like the sun. Rise in love. We are born to be surrounded by the love from up above. Rise in love. We are meant to live together and to reunite as one. We are one, the human race. We are here to save the earth. Raise your hand and make a change. We are one, we are one. We are one, no time to waste. Come together and embrace. Your sister, brother, see your face. And everyone, 'cause we are one. Rise in love. We are born to be surrounded by the love from up above. Rise in love. We are meant to live together and to reunite as one in love. Give me rise in love. We are born to be surrounded by the love from up above. Rise in love. We are here to live together and to reunite as one in love.